By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly why the most magnetic people in any room are almost never the loudest ones, and you'll have 11 specific, doable habits that make you quietly, undeniably attractive without saying a single word to prove it. Not attractive in the shallow sense, attractive in the sense of people leaning in when you talk, remembering you after one conversation, wanting to be near your energy without knowing exactly why. Think about the last person who genuinely captivated you in a room. Chances are they weren't performing, they weren't working the hardest for attention, they were just there, fully, unbothered, and somehow that was enough to make everyone else orbit them a little. Here's the blunt part. Almost everything you've been taught about being likable, talk more, smile more, compliment more, perform more, is actively working against you, and later in this video, I'll show you the one habit on this list that feels like the opposite of confidence, but is actually the single most attractive thing you can do in any room. If you already sense this is true, type quiet power in the comments. Let's get into it. You walk into a room, a work event, a party, a family gathering, and within about 4 seconds, something in you shifts. You start narrating yourself. Am I standing right? Did that joke land? Is my voice too loud, too quiet, too much? You catch yourself mid-sentence, editing in real time, watching your own performance instead of just having the conversation. By the time you leave, you're replaying the whole thing not because anything went wrong, but because some part of you is convinced everyone else was watching as closely as you were watching yourself. At work, you notice the person who talks the least in meetings is somehow the one whose opinion people ask for after. You, meanwhile, fill silence the second it appears because silence feels like failure, like proof you have nothing to offer. So you talk, you over-explain. You laugh a beat too early at things that weren't quite funny yet, just to keep the energy moving, just to seem easy to be around, and afterward you feel strangely tired, like you handed something away and didn't get anything back for it. At home, texting someone you're interested in, you reread your message 4 times before sending it, then immediately regret the exclamation point. You watch the read receipt like it's a verdict. None of this is really about the message. It's about a much older fear that if you stop performing for even a second, people will realize there was nothing underneath worth staying for. Epictetus had a blunt answer for this exact anxiety. He taught that other people's approval was never actually yours to control, and chasing it directly was like chasing your own shadow. The harder you run at it, the faster it moves away from you. He wasn't talking about texting or job interviews, obviously, but the mechanism he described is exactly what's draining you. The constant low-grade effort of managing what other people think moment to moment instead of simply being the person and letting the impression form on its own. Here's the core idea, and it's simple enough to remember in one sentence. Attraction, social, romantic, professional, all of it is not built by performing more, it's built by leaking less. Every time you over-explain, over-laugh, over-agree, or chase a reaction, you leak a small piece of your own presence, and presence is the actual thing people find magnetic. The less you leak, the more of you is left in the room, and people can feel that difference even when they can't name it. Let me be clear about what this does not mean. This isn't about becoming cold, mysterious in a manipulative way, or playing games to seem unbothered while secretly obsessing over what someone thinks. That's just performance wearing a different costume, and people can usually smell the difference between real containment and a strategy. This also isn't about talking less for the sake of seeming deep. Silence used as a prop is just as needy as over-talking. It's still built around managing an impression. What we're actually talking about is an internal shift where you stop treating every social interaction as an audition and start treating it as something you're simply present for, with nothing riding on the outcome. Compare that to how modern social life actually trains you. You've been rewarded your whole life for visible effort, the fast reply, the enthusiastic reaction, the eagerness to please, the constant broadcasting of how much you like someone or how interested you are. Dating apps reward the quick message, workplaces reward the person who speaks up fastest in the meeting, social media rewards the loudest, most reactive version of you. All of it teaches the same lesson: more output equals more value, but most people, if they're honest, find that behavior a little exhausting to be around even when they can't say why. The 11 habits we're about to go through all point in the opposite direction: less broadcasting, more presence. Let's start with the easiest one and build from there. Because by the end, this list gets a lot sharper than smile less. Habit 1. Stop over-explaining yourself. You know this one already: the friend who cancels plans and sends 4 paragraphs justifying it, the coworker who apologizes for a 2-minute delay with a full backstory, you doing the exact same thing without noticing, turning a simple "I can't make it" into a defense brief nobody asked for. Marcus Aurelius kept reminding himself in his private writings that a person's actions should speak plainly, and the words around them should be few, not because talking was shameful, but because excessive explanation is usually a request for permission dressed up as information. Psychologically, this taps into something close to the spotlight effect, the well-documented tendency to believe other people are scrutinizing your choices far more closely than they actually are, so you over-explain to a jury that was never really convened. The reframe: a short, calm answer isn't rude, it's actually more respected, because it signals you don't need the other person's approval to feel settled in your own decision. The action: today, when you decline or explain something, cut your response in half. Say the short version and stop talking. Let the silence after it sit there, uncorrected. Habit 2, one level up. Slow down. Specifically, slow down your movements, your speech, and the pace at which you respond to things. Watch someone who's anxious in a room, quick glances, fast talking, filling every gap immediately versus someone settled, who pauses before answering, who doesn't flinch at the beat of quiet. The second person reads, instantly and unconsciously, as more secure, even if neither of them has said anything of substance yet. Seneca wrote to his friend Lucilius that hurry is almost always a symptom of an unquiet mind, that people rushing through their days, their words, their reactions, are usually running from something rather than moving towards something. In psychology, this connects to how we read nonverbal cues for status and confidence. Rushed, jittery movement is consistently associated with lower perceived status, while slower, more deliberate movement reads as someone who isn't worried about being interrupted or dismissed, because on some level they don't expect to be. The reframe: slowing down isn't about seeming important, it's about actually being unhurried, which people can feel even when they can't articulate it. The action: today, in one conversation, deliberately pause for a full second before responding to a question, instead of jumping in the instant the other person finishes. Habit 3, listen without preparing your response while the other person is still talking. Be honest with yourself here. How often are you actually listening in a conversation versus half listening while assembling your next sentence, waiting for your turn to speak? Most people can feel the difference, even subconsciously. There's a specific kind of engagement in someone's eyes when they're actually receiving what you're saying instead of just waiting you out. Murafadok taught that we have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason worth taking seriously, that most people's instinct to talk far outpaces their instinct to actually understand what's in front of them. This lines up with active listening research in psychology, which consistently shows that people rate conversations as more satisfying and the other person as more likable when they feel genuinely heard, regardless of how clever the listener's eventual response actually is. The reframe: you don't need a brilliant reply, you need presence during the sentence before yours. The action: in your next real conversation, ask one follow-up question about something the other person just said before adding anything about yourself. Here's a question worth sitting with. When's the last time you left a conversation and realized you couldn't actually remember most of what the other person said because you were too busy managing how you came across? That's not a character flaw. That's just a habit, and habits can be replaced. Habit 4. Stop fishing for reactions after you speak. This is a subtle one, and almost everyone does it without noticing. You make a joke and then glance to check if it landed. You share news and then watch the other person's face a beat too long, waiting for the validation to confirm the story was worth telling. It's such a small tell, but it's visible, and it quietly signals that your sense of whether something was worthwhile depends on an external verdict. Marcus Aurelius pointed out that constantly needing confirmation from others for things you already know to be true is a kind of self-abandonment, handing your own judgment over to an audience who wasn't even there for the original experience. This connects to what psychologists call external locus of evaluation, building your sense of whether something is good, funny, or worthwhile primarily around outside reactions rather than your own internal read. People with a strong internal locus tend to be perceived as more confident and ironically more trustworthy because they don't seem to need anything from the interaction. The reframe: not needing a reaction doesn't mean you don't care. It means you already decided the thing was worth saying before anyone responded. The action: next time you share something, say it and then move the conversation forward without pausing to check the other person's face for approval. Habit 5. Hold eye contact naturally, then look away. Don't overcorrect into either extreme. This one trips people up because they've heard strong eye contact is attractive and take it too far, holding a stare a beat too long until it reads as intense or unsettling instead of confident. The actual skill isn't about maximizing eye contact, it's about not being the one who breaks it first out of anxiety, while also not weaponizing it to prove a point. Seneca observed that genuine composure doesn't need to announce itself through intensity. A settled person's gaze is steady because their mind is steady, not because they're trying to win something with their eyes. Psychologically, this relates to how humans read gaze aversion as a subtle status and anxiety signal. People who look away too quickly too often are consistently perceived as more nervous or less trustworthy, while people who hold a relaxed natural gaze read as more comfortable in their own skin. The reframe: eye contact isn't a tool to deploy, it's a byproduct of actually being present instead of scanning the room for the exit. The action: in your next conversation, notice how often you look away first and try letting the other person break contact before you do, just once. Habit 6. Get comfortable with silence in a conversation instead of rushing to fill it. This is where a lot of people's discomfort peaks, because silence in a conversation can feel like a verdict, like something's wrong, like you need to fix it immediately with another sentence, another joke, another question. But watch two people who are genuinely comfortable together. Silence between them isn't awkward, it's just space. A discomfort you feel in silence usually isn't coming from the other person at all, it's coming from you, and specifically from a fear that quiet means the connection is failing. Marcus Aurelius wrote about the difference between necessary speech and speech used only to avoid the discomfort of stillness, noting that a mind at peace doesn't need constant noise to prove its functioning. This connects to a well-documented finding in conversation research. People consistently, wildly overestimate how uncomfortable pauses actually feel to the other person, when in reality, most silences read as neutral or even comfortable, unless the person filling them is visibly panicking about it. The reframe: silence isn't a problem you caused, it's a space you're allowed to simply occupy. The action: next time a natural pause happens in conversation, count to 3 in your head before speaking again, instead of rushing to fill it. If you've made it this far, you already think differently than most people watching this, because most viewers click off right around the halfway point, the moment a video stops being comfortable tips and starts asking for actual behavior change. So do one simple thing right now: hit like on this video. It takes 2 seconds, and it tells me you want the sharper half of this list, which is coming up next. And remember what I promised you at the beginning: the habit that feels like the opposite of confidence, but is actually the most attractive thing on this entire list. We're about to get there. Let's keep going. Habit 7. Stop trying to be liked by everyone in the room. This one is harder than it sounds, because most people don't consciously think, I need everyone to like me. It shows up quieter than that, in the way you soften an opinion around someone who might disagree, or laugh a little extra at a joke from someone whose approval matters more to your ego than it should. The instinct to be universally liked is one of the most attraction-killing habits there is, because it flattens you into whatever shape seems safest for the widest audience, and the flattened person is forgettable by design. Epictetus taught that trying to please everyone is a project with no finish line and no reward at the end of it. Some people simply won't like you no matter what you do, and spending your energy chasing the ones who won't is energy stolen from the people who already do. This connects to a basic principle in social psychology, sometimes called the liking gap. We tend to underestimate how much people already like us after a conversation, which means the anxious effort to be more likable is usually unnecessary in the first place, aimed at a deficit that doesn't actually exist. The reframe: being disliked by some people isn't a failure of your personality, it's proof you actually have one. The action: today, let one small opinion of yours show, even if you suspect it won't land well with everyone in the room. Habit 8. And here's where the counterintuitive part really starts. Withhold your full reaction. Don't give away everything you're thinking or feeling the instant you feel it. Most people treat transparency as a virtue in every context. Say what you feel immediately. React fully and instantly. Let your face and words broadcast your internal state in real time. And in close relationships, real transparency matters enormously. But in the wider social world, total immediate transparency reads as a lack of self-possession, because it signals that you have no internal space between stimulus and response, that anyone can see your entire hand the moment the cards are dealt. Marcus Aurelius practiced something like this deliberately, taking a beat before reacting to insults or provocations specifically, so his response came from consideration rather than reflex, understanding that an instant, fully visible reaction hands the other person total information and total control over what happens next. In psychology, this connects to the concept of self-monitoring. People who regulate their expressive behavior thoughtfully, without being fully unreadable or fake, are often perceived as higher status, precisely because a small gap between what they feel and what they immediately show reads as composure rather than dishonesty. The reframe: withholding your immediate reaction isn't manipulation, it's giving yourself and the moment room to actually respond instead of just react. The action: the next time something surprises, flatters or provokes you today, delay your visible reaction by even 2 or 3 seconds before showing it. Let me pause and ask you something direct. Of the habits so far, which one made you flinch a little, not because it was hard to understand, but because you already know exactly which relationship or room in your life you do the opposite in? Hold that answer. It matters for what's coming. Habit 9. Stop mirroring people for approval. There's a version of social mirroring that's healthy and human, naturally matching someone's energy, tone, rapport building. But there's another version, far more common, where you quietly erase your actual opinions to match whoever you're talking to, agreeing with things you don't fully believe, laughing at jokes you don't find funny, nodding along to political or personal takes that don't match your own, all in the name of smoothing the interaction. Over time, this doesn't make you more likable. It makes you invisible, because the people around you are essentially just talking to a reflection of themselves. Seneca warned that constantly adjusting yourself to match every person you encounter leaves you, eventually without a fixed shape of your own. A person who is everything to everyone ends up being genuinely nothing to anyone in particular. This connects directly to cognitive dissonance, the internal discomfort created when your outward behavior consistently contradicts your actual beliefs. A discomfort that, left unresolved long enough, starts eroding your sense of who you even are underneath the performance. The reframe, disagreeing occasionally, doesn't damage a connection. Constant, invisible agreement is what actually damages it, because it removes the second real person from the conversation. The action, today in one low-stakes conversation, voice a genuine mild disagreement instead of defaulting to agreement. Habit 10. Stop announcing your plans and ambitions before they're real. This is a specific, sharp one. There's a common urge to tell everyone about the goal, the project, the change you're about to make, partly for accountability, but mostly, if you're honest, for the hit of validation that comes from people reacting to your ambition before you've actually done anything. It feels productive. It isn't. Worse, it quietly drains the actual motivation you needed to do the thing, because a part of your brain treats the social credit from announcing the goal as a substitute for having achieved it. Marcus Aurelius, a literal emperor with every reason to broadcast his own greatness, wrote almost entirely for an audience of one himself, treating the doing of the thing as the entire point, with recognition as, at best, an irrelevant afterthought. This connects to a well-documented finding sometimes described through goal gradient and self-completion research. Announcing an intention and receiving social congratulation for it can create a premature sense of identity completion, which measurably reduces the drive to actually follow through, because the brain has already banked some of the reward. The reframe, staying quiet about your ambitions until they're real, isn't insecurity. It's protecting the fuel you'll actually need to finish. The action. Pick one goal you are about to announce and instead just start working on it silently for 2 weeks before you tell anyone. And habit 11, the sharpest one, the one I promised you at the very start of this video, the one that looks like the opposite of confidence, but is actually the deepest form of it. Stop needing to be understood at all. Not liked, we've covered that. Understood. This is different and harder. It's the quiet, persistent itch to make sure people get the real reasons behind your choices, to correct misreadings of your character, to leave every interaction confident that the other person walked away with an accurate picture of who you actually are. It feels like honesty. Oh, it's actually a subtle form of dependency, because it means your peace is contingent on other people's internal model of you being correct, which is something you will never fully control no matter how much you explain yourself. Epictetus drew the sharpest possible line on this. Your judgments, your character, your effort, those are yours. Other people's conclusions about you belong entirely to them, and spending your life trying to manage a conclusion that isn't yours to manage is a losing game played on someone else's board. This is where cognitive dissonance shows up one more time, but at a deeper layer. The discomfort of being misjudged is real, but resolving that discomfort by chasing accurate perception in every single person you meet is not just exhausting, it's impossible, because perception is filtered through each observer's own history, insecurities and mood, none of which you can edit from the outside. The reframe. Being fully understood by everyone was never actually available to you, and letting go of that need isn't giving up. It's the single most attractive, most settled thing you can do, because a person who doesn't need to be understood radiates a kind of calm that a person still chasing it never quite manages. The action, pick one person who has misjudged you and consciously choose, today, not to correct it. Let them be wrong about you. Feel what that actually costs and notice it's less than you expected. And here's the paradox that ties this entire list together. The twist I told you was coming. Everything we've covered, the shorter explanations, the slower movements, the withheld reactions, the silence, the refusal to be fully understood, all of it looks, on the surface, like less effort, like you're doing less to be liked. And that's exactly backwards from how most people think attraction works. Most people assume attraction is built through addition: more charm, more effort, more visible enthusiasm, more proof that you're interested and invested and trying. But the actual mechanism running underneath all 11 of these habits is subtraction. You're not adding magnetism. You're removing the leaks, the over-explaining, the approval fishing, the instant reactions, the constant self-correction, and what's left, once the leaks are sealed, is simply more of you, undiluted, occupying the room without apology. People aren't drawn to the performance. They're drawn to what's left when the performance stops. That's the whole secret, and it's almost insultingly simple once you see it. The less you leak yourself away trying to be liked, the more of you there actually is to be attracted to. So picture this. You walk into that same room, work event, party, family gathering 6 months from now, having quietly built these 11 habits. You don't narrate yourself at the door anymore, you just walk in, Someone asks you a question and you answer it once, cleanly, without the 4-paragraph justification trailing behind it. A silence opens up in the conversation and you don't rush to fill it, you just let it breathe, and somehow the other person relaxes too, because your calm is contagious in a way your old anxiety never was. You say something and you don't glance up to check if it landed. You already know if it was worth saying. Someone disagrees with you and it doesn't unravel you because you were never performing agreement in the first place. You leave that room and for the first time in a long time, you're not replaying the whole interaction on the drive home, wondering what they thought. You already know what you think. That's the whole difference. The room is still loud, people are still going to misjudge you sometimes, still going to want more from you than you're willing to leak out for free. That part doesn't change. What changes is that none of it moves you the way it used to because you're not leaking anymore, you're just present, fully. And it turns out that was the most attractive thing in the room the entire time. Here's your challenge. For the next 7 days, pick just one habit from this list, one, and practice it quietly without telling anyone you're doing it. No announcement, no explanation, just the practice itself. Because if there's one line to take from this entire video, let it be this: you don't become more attractive by giving people more of a performance. You become attractive by giving people less of the leak and more of the real thing underneath it. If this one landed, tell me which of the 11 you're starting with. Just drop the number in the comments. That's the whole ask. And if you want more of this kind of quiet, sharp self-work, subscribe, because that's exactly what this channel is built around. Thank you for staying the whole way through. Stay quiet, stay magnetic.